The temporal bones provide extensive and essential protection to our brain. The temporal bone supports the part of the face known as the temple and houses the organ of hearing. The terms temporal and temple, from the Latin word for time, refer to the common first appearance of gray hairs, a sign of time's passage, at the temples. The temporal bones lie inferior to the parietal bones, which contribute to form the lateral region of the skull. The temporal bones also form the medial portions of the cranial floor. There are three major regions of the temporal bones. They are the squamous part, the tympanic part, and also the petrous part. The squamous part is plate-shaped and abuts the squamous suture. The squamous suture stitches the temporal bones to the parietal bones, the occipital bone, and the zygomatic bones. The squamous part includes one process and one fossa. All of these components will be discussed shortly. The tympanic part surrounds the external acoustic meatus, or otherwise known as the external ear canal. It is through this canal that sound enters the ear. The external acoustic meatus at its deep end are parts of the external ear. Tympanic is also another word for eardrum. The petrous part of the temporal bone contributes to the cranial base. It forms a bony wedge between the occipital bone posteriorly and the sphenoid bone anteriorly. The petrous part includes one fossa, several foramina, the internal acoustic meatus, and two processes. There are several named processes of the temporal bone. The three processes that will be discussed in this video are the styloid process, the mastoid process, and the zygomatic process of the temporal bone. The zygomatic process is a bar-like extension of the squamous part. Zygomatic means cheek. The zygomatic process projects anteriorly to meet the zygomatic bone of the face. Together, these two structures form the zygomatic arch. This arch is referred to colloquially as the cheekbone. The mastoid process is a component of the petrous part. The mastoid process is lateral and posterior to the styloid process. The term mastoid means breast-shaped and is the anchoring site for some neck muscles, including the sternocleidomastoid. The mastoid process is inferior and posterior to the ear. The mastoid process contains air sinuses called mastoid air cells, which lie just posterior to the middle ear cavity. Infections can spread from the throat to the middle ear to the mastoid cells. Such an infection, called mastoiditis, can even spread to the brain and cause death. The styloid process projects inferiorly from the petrous part. The term styloid means stake-like. This process is an attachment point for the styloglossus muscle, stylopharyngeus muscle, and the stylohyoid ligament. The mandibular fossa is oval-shaped and is an element of the squamous part. It is on the inferior surface of the zygomatic process and receives the condylar process of the mandible, and together they form the freely movable temporomandibular joint. A disorder associated with this joint is called temporomandibular joint syndrome, often called TMJ. Several foramina penetrate the petrous part. Some of the foramina that are included are the jugular foramen, the carotid canal, and the styloid mastoid foramen. The jugular foramen is located where the petrous part forms a suture with the occipital bone. Through this foramen passes the largest vein of the head, the internal jugular vein, and cranial nerves 9, 10, and 11. The carotid canal opens up the skull's inferior aspect, just anterior to the jugular foramen. The internal carotid artery, which is the main artery to the brain, passes through the carotid canal into the cranial cavity. The styloid-mastoid foramen is located in between the styloid and mastoid processes. A branch of cranial nerve 7, the facial nerve, leaves the skull through this foramen. Two openings of the temporal bones are going to be discussed in this video. One opening is the internal acoustic meatus. The other opening is the external acoustic meatus. As discussed previously in the video, the external acoustic meatus, otherwise known as the external ear canal, is a segment of the tympanic part of the temporal bone. The external ear canal is the tube through which sound enters the ear. The portion of the external acoustic meatus where it meets the eardrum is part of the external ear. The internal acoustic meatus lies in the cranial cavity. It is located on the posterior surface of the petrous part. It transmits cranial nerves 7 and 8, which are the facial and vestibulocochlear nerves. The temporal bone is one of the most complex bones in the human body. The three major regions of the temporal bone are the squamous part, tympanic part, and the petrous part. The temporal bone is both protective and supportive in its contribution to the skull's structure. It carries important blood vessels and nerves, including 3 cranial nerves, and houses an essential sense, the sense of hearing. This video has been prepared as part of the course requirements of Human Anatomy at Saddleback College.